What is the best magic for mages? I wonder. But before we get started with today's video, I just want to say thank you guys for liking and subscribing. And if you haven't liked or subscribed right now, be sure to do so, as you know, showing that support to me is amazing because it makes me want to, keep doing these videos for you guys on my channel. But yeah, without further ado, let's get right into the video. So the question we asked ourselves here today is there a best magic for mages? And that answer will vary from person to person. For me, I say yes, there is a best magic for mages. Now, how do we determine what exactly is the best magic? How do we determine that, right? Because there's a lot of things that factor into best magic. And these things are damage, right? What most people know for calculating best magic. Speed, which some people appreciate more than others. Size, which a lot of other people appreciate more than others. Maybe sometimes people want more size over damage or speed. And status effects, right? Now that we know the components to what makes up a magic, let's start to determine what actually is the best magic. So first things first, let's get out of the way. What is the most damaging magic in Arcane Odyssey? Now, there's actually two magics that are very high in damage on impact, and that is Earth and Metal, both sitting at 1 times damage infinity. Now, if you only value damage in Arcane Odyssey, you're only going to pick Earth or Metal, as these are the highest damaging magics in AO. Now, what exactly does this mean? This means that power will scale better onto those types of magics. That means your spells will be doing more damage. The spells that usually do low damage will be doing higher damage. Your synergies will be naturally doing more damage as well, since you have a higher infinity. But yes, again, if you value impact damage, you are going to pick either Earth or Metal. Let's say you don't value damage. Let's say you value speed overall. You value speed over anything else in the game. There's two magics that you can pick from if you're only going to value speed, and that is light magic, which is the king of speed, as sitting at 1.8 times speed affinity. And then you have lightning magic, which is sitting at 1.5 times speed affinity. So what does speed actually affect on magic? Well, it affects the speed of which your spells cast for some of the spells. It affects the range of some of your attacks, such as beam. It also affects the projectile speed. Now, a lot of you guys know this, that it does affect projectile speed. But how much speed do you actually need before it starts to be excessive? Unlike damage, damage is always something that is going to increase your DPS. Unlike in AO, speed doesn't necessarily increase your DPS at all. And instead, it kind of just increases how fast your startup is going to go through, which doesn't indirectly increase your DPS, surprisingly. The best way to explain it is that I'm using light magic. I'm basically riding a Lamborghini, while you're using metal magic or something average and you're driving a Honda Civic, right? At the end of the day, we're both gonna have to stop at some point, right? And that point is end leg. We're both just gonna have to stop at end leg. Now, on to the third stat, which is size. Size is something that basically increases how big the hitbox of your attacks are. Now, from magic to magic and spell to spell, size is going to affect it very differently. Now, the best magics when it comes to size are Earth, Explosion, and Ash. Now, the two first magics that I listed off here sit at 1.3 size, which is Explosion and Earth, right? They both have 1.3 size, and Ash following up super close with 1.25. Now, what does having a high size stat infinity do for you? That means that the size stat scales a whole lot better, right? The more size you have innately, the more size you're going to gain off that stat. Now, let's get onto statuses. What status effects are the best when it comes to magics? Now, status effects is a very interesting way of looking at magics, right? Because some can be utility, some can be damage, some can be just area of denial. It varies from person to person. Now, if you're not too picky with status effects, then you can throw out a lot of these out the window and you can pretty much determine what the best magic is. But let's talk about them anyways. So when it comes to status effects, you have damage over time, you have stun, you also have area of denial, And then you have blind. Oh, and you also have crystallized, which is a very different mechanic here, as you are required to, stack up hits, which is very different from the other status effects. If your purpose is to pretty much do as much damage as possible, as fast as possible, without being too hard to hit, then you can pretty much remove a lot of these status effects here. And that means blind. All the blind magics pretty much get out of the table. There, no questions asked. So stuff like your light magic, stuff like your snow magic, and stuff like your sand magic, they are pretty much just off the table, as they have average damage, they have a blinding utility effect, and they don't have a dot. They only have stun potential. Now, this pretty much narrows down the list to any dot magic and any magic that has high damage affinity, right? While still having, average speed and decent size. This pretty much leaves us with a couple choices here. We can go Earth, although very slow, has 1 times damage affinity. We can go Metal, although also very slow, has 1 times damage affinity, but has decent AoE, just like Earth. We can go Magma, which is also slow, but has 0.9 times damage affinity, and it also has a dot, and it has 20% extra size, sitting at 1.2 size affinity, but it's also very slow. Or if we don't care to factor in dot at all, we can go Shadow, which is 0.95 damage affinity, 1.3 speed, and 1.15 size. If we want to determine what actually is the best magic, let's determine what makes the best magic the best magic. And I think this is fairly simple, right? We just have to have a magic that is close to 1 times damage, so anything 0.9 or higher. We have to have a magic that has relatively decent speed, or if not, closer to moderate speed, so anywhere between 1 and 1.4 is completely fine. And let's determine the size as well. Any magic that has 1.1 size to 1.3 size is fairly good enough for most players, as you'll be able to pretty much skill all 3 stats very well, which includes speed for attack speed, size from bursting, and power for damage. Now, the reason why all these stats are very important is because there's one thing you can't build in this game through magic, and that is defense, right? The only way to get defense is through armor. So the more innate damage you have means the less power you have to invest into, and the more you can just build into defense to build up your survivability. This also applies to the other stats as well. Now, which stats in AO are most abundant? That is power, defense, attack size, and attack speed. Now, what armor in the game houses defense and another one of these stats, right? We have Sunken and we have Cernix, both offering defense while also offering attack speed or attack size. But what did we say earlier about attack speed? Eventually, we're all gonna have to stop at the red light. So we're just gonna settle for something that increases our hitboxes. Now, that would be attack size. Now, with that in mind, Sunken gives you defense and attack size, right? Calvis gives you power and attack size. So now that we have discussed the most abundant stats in the game for a magic type build, we have essentially eliminated the necessity to even consider any defense attack speed oriented armor set. We have also eliminated all the magic types that have slow infinities. Now this leaves us to 3 magics pretty much. We have acid, we have water, and we have shadow. First, let's talk about acid. Acid has 0.875 damage affinity, 1 speed, and 1 size, but it has a dot to make up for it. Now, what does this dot do for us? This dot pretty much increases our damage over time, as well as providing a self-synergy of 5%. This is basically a huge deal if you are applying pressure constantly. If you don't feel like you're going to be attacking fast enough to make the dot and self-synergy work to its fullest potential, then acid isn't really the best magic. Now, it does have a lot of potential, but it's not the best magic for the average player. On to water. Water has 0.925 damage, 1 speed, and 1.2 size. Now, this magic has pretty decent stats overall. It has higher base damage than acid, but it does not have a dot, and it has bigger size, which means you have to aim less. But it is default speed, keep that in mind. You want some speed to make up for the lack of, minor adjustments when it comes to aiming. So where does this leave us now? This leaves us with the best magic in the game, Shadow, sitting at 0.95 damage, 1.3 speed, and 1.15 size. Now, if you're looking at the stats right now, these stats come close to being near perfect across all boards except minus size. It did get nerfed before, but clearly it wasn't enough to stop this machine. Let's review over why Shadow is the best magic. For one, it is the closest to 1 times damage multiplier without having shitty stats in other categories. That's one reason. 2, it has 1.3 speed, which means you don't have to necessarily build attack speed at all in your build if you are comfortable with 1.3 speed, which most people are when it comes to projectiles and throwing out attacks pretty quickly. And you have 1.15 size. With this in mind, you do scale way better with attack size, which is a stat that's very abundant with defense armors and power armors. Where exactly does this leave us? This leaves us with a all-round stat build. You pretty much have high HP, high damage, really good speed, and really good attack size. Your mage will pretty much be fully kitted in all regards. Nothing will be able to stop you. You don't need to sacrifice any sort of stat in this build, in this mage build, in this magic oriented build. It doesn't matter what class you're using Shadow with, it will benefit regardless. This is the most all-rounder magic you can pick up in Arcane Odyssey. If you are a warlock, you can pick up Shadow, it'll be completely fine. If you're a conjurer, you can pick up Shadow, you'll be completely fine. If you're a mage, you can pick up Shadow, you will be completely fine. It does not matter what magic you pick when you have this beast existing in the meta. But yes, now to answer your question, Masa, Mr. Masa, Shadow is the best magic for any player that's looking to really start off as a mage. And if you want to have these niche playstyles later down the line, I encourage you guys to pretty much pick any magic you want and be creative, make something different. But yeah, that's all pretty much for me. If you guys did like this type of video, be sure to like and subscribe, and see you guys on the next one.